The first ever summit on airline accessibility ended with little in the way of new penalties for airlines who mistreat passengers with disabilities. Federal ministers heard from disability advocates and airline executives in Ottawa. Now, airlines have reportedly agreed to implement a common medical intake form. Diversity, Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities Minister Kamal Khera says that the form is going to streamline the travel preparation process for passengers with disabilities, but what kind of change will it actually bring? With us this morning is Heather McCain. She's the Executive Director of Live Educate Transform Society. It's an organization in Vancouver that advocates on behalf of those living with disabilities and works to educate others about creating accessible communities. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to start with your personal experiences. We heard a lot over this summit, but what are some of your lived experience while flying with the mobility devices?
Sure. So one trip I was flying to Winnipeg for a conference and I lose the use of my arms. So I have a headrest on my wheelchair that I can control the chair with. And on the flight to Winnipeg, that part of my wheelchair was broken off. And on the flight back, the entire back of my power wheelchair was snapped off. And that was just one trip.
And then what's the process for you like, Heather, when you try to either file a complaint or ask some questions about what happened?
Yeah, so I mean, the onus is on the disabled person to be the one who contacts the airlines and advocates for themselves, and it can be quite a tiring and frustrating process. Eventually, I did get some funds towards fixing the wheelchair, but I was without a fully operating chair for quite a long time.
I'm curious about your thoughts on can any improvements really be made without instituting some proper training for airline staff and some standards across the board on how to meet accessibility needs. It seems to be very, sometimes per airport or per airline.
Absolutely. There needs to be reliable disability awareness training where if you fly from one airport to another, you are ensured of receiving care that is, consistent and reliable. And also, our organization is entirely staffed by disabled and neurodivergent people because lived expertise matters. Mm-hmm. And the training that we do is important because often people don't realize what the broad spectrum of disability encompasses, how interpersonal and societal ableism shows up, and that the majority of disabilities are non-evident, which has led to a lot of the issues on the airlines as well.
One of the things that you are really promoting is this idea of training and, in the hope that if people are aware that they will do differently. How do you feel about the results of this summit? So there's a medical intake form, but there seems to be no push towards standardized training.
The medical intake form is once again putting the onus on the shoulders of disabled people. And, the responsibility needs to be on the shoulders of the airline. People with disabilities are often made to feel like we're the problem when inaccessibility is. We need a system that's fixed. Disabled people have to advocate for ourselves. The majority of disabled folk are great self-advocates because their lives depend on it. Having an intake form is just more paperwork for disabled people who already have so much paperwork. And it's not really going to fix the systemic issues.
Heather, I'm so curious, when we run these stories about, some of them we've run even today, about what happens with someone who lives with disabilities, and, we feel outrage, we feel frustration. But I've spoken to a lot of people in the community in this past year, and nothing seems to move past that stage of outrage. Why do you think that is? Why do people understand that it's not fair or right, but nothing changes?
I think to a large extent because it doesn't affect them personally. And so it's disabled people constantly having to fight for ourselves and our voices to be heard. And there isn't that broader understanding of how important it is that we all work together in order to continue to have pressure on government and human rights communities to really ensure that access for disabled people is not just on paper, but is actually what the lived experience is.
We said that airline executives were also at this summit, and Air Canada has responded to allegations of mistreatment on its flight with a series of actions it says are geared towards improving accessibility. And they include hiring a customer accessibility director, mandating annual accessibility training for all employees, and instituting the Sunflower program, in which customers who may require assistance can wear a lanyard that indicates so and then allows customers to track mobility devices via an app. What do you make of a response like this?
I think they're steps forward, but they're not the steps that we need. The lanyard program is yet another thing that puts the onus on the disabled person to self-identify, to remind staff that they have disabilities, even if it may not be visible. Having someone who is in a position of working with disabled passengers is good, but the question is, like, how many of them will there be per airport, and how hard will it be to access them, and what are their actual duties? And so, we need clearly set out timelines that include accountability. There must be consequences for not meeting access requirements. One of the really important things is there should be external oversight of complaints that are submitted. And this is important because it also helps to keep data on the frequency of these issues and what the most pervasive experiences are. Because often people with disabilities are made to feel like we're exaggerating or these situations haven't happened. And I think once data becomes collected outside of airlines, then, it'll really show just how big of a problem inaccessibility on airlines and with airport staff as well. I think airlines are often focused on, but it's baggage handlers. I sat on a plane one time and watched a baggage handler throw my manual chair down a flight of stairs and watched it bounce on the concrete. So it's not just the airlines, it's the entire, airline, airport staff, and everybody needs training.
Yeah, let's hope mobility devices get better treatment than a set of skis that are on a flight. Heather, thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.